Welcome to U.S. Eagle Claw YouTube channel. The striking operations of the Ukrainian army, full of mind games, inflicted dramatic losses on the Russian troops in the 10th month of the war. Trying to seize the advantage on the tension line, both sides of the war made serious breakthroughs in the struggle for supremacy this week. During the 10-month period, Russia focused on new offensive action plans to compensate for its losses, while the Ukrainian armed forces did not neglect to counterattack as well as eliminating the attack attempts planned by the invading troops in critical areas this week. The tension of the war increased sharply as January approached. Shortly before Christmas, Putin's army has lost more than 70,000 square kilometers of occupied territory since it abandoned its attempt to capture Kiev in the spring. After these huge losses, the Russian army fell into a very passive position on the territory of Ukraine. Over time, with the effect of all these negative situations, Russian soldiers began to withdraw slowly from the regions they occupied in Ukraine. New reports received yesterday showed that Russia's top military officials were considering once again demoralizing, withdrawing their troops from southern Ukraine. Local residents in and around the city of Nova Kakhovka are spreading rumors that Russian soldiers will soon flee these areas altogether. Following these rumors, the Russians redeployed their individual units and moved some of their troops from Kakhovka and Nova Kakhovka in the Kherson region to the Nizhny Syrohozy enclave. Also, local sources in this region predict that Kakhovka will be abandoned by Russian troops by the end of the year. Therefore, the occupiers and residents of the Kakhovka region are offered to move to the temporarily occupied Ukrainian Crimea. Nova Kakhovka is a very critical area with a strategic dam and hydroelectric power station that has been controlled by Russian forces since spring. Currently, the activities of the Ukrainian army in this region also play an important role in the withdrawal of Russian troops. Each day, very violent and interesting events take place in the hot war line stretching all the way to the Crimea. The Ukrainian army wants to create a control corridor stretching from Nova Kakhovka to the Crimea. After the Kiev army recaptured the strategic city of Kherson in the south, the connection roads of the Russian troops in this region, their operational plans, and most importantly, the final situation in the Crimea were greatly affected. In this way, the foundations of the control corridor targeted by Ukraine were laid. Nowadays, the Ukrainian armed forces has built up a serious military buildup at the strategic points of the control corridor it aims to extend to the Crimea. Especially in recent days, the Ukrainian army has successfully carried out missions such as critical dawn operations, forming important front lines. At a time when Russia was also very afraid of this situation, the events in the Black Sea brought the temperature of the water almost to a boiling point. The Russian Navy is forced to change the positions of its submarines and withdraw its warships from time to time. On the other hand, NATO reconnaissance drones are constantly patrolling the Black Sea, monitoring the Russian Navy within its borders. While the temperature of the Black Sea water was too hot to swim due to the tension of the war, the striking operation carried out by the Ukrainian armed forces yesterday revealed that nothing is impossible. The Black Sea coastline witnessed quite lively moments last night. A submarine operation that is like a thriller has taken Snake Island under its influence. Ukrainian Marine commandos carried out an infiltration operation to Snake Island at around 3 p.m. last night. Satellite images of the incident recorded the critical activity on the island moment by moment. The island is a strategic area in the western Black Sea and was under Russian occupation until July. The Russians were completely expelled from the island by July 1st. However, since then, Ukraine had not deployed any military assets on the island, and it was seen as risky. The entry of Ukrainian landing forces on the island was not noticed by anyone at first. Foreign journalists filming stories about the current situation of the island were also present at the moment when the Ukrainian naval commandos landed on Snake Island. With the presence of the world press on Snake Island, the historical operation organized by the Ukrainian naval commandos took place exactly as we mentioned, with the taste of an action movie. The exact number of soldiers in the Ukrainian naval commando unit landing on Snake Island has not been disclosed. It was noted that electronic warfare (RER) and RTR facilities were deployed on Snake Island to warn the Ukrainian armed forces in case of any ships or boats approaching the island. Ukraine was here to blockade this island with its full equipment. Today, in the morning, Ukrainian information sources published photos showing the moment when the naval commandos of the Kiev army and journalists were on Snake Island. These frames found wide coverage in the world press. This operation, which also alarmed the Moscow administration, both angered and worried Vladimir Putin at first. It has been talked about that the Ukrainian armed forces, which has become famous with cross-border operations, will use Snake Island to sign important plans in the Black Sea. Ukraine may begin to use this island for military purposes. There has been no reaction yet from Russia to this shocking Ukraine invasion, but in a short time, a retaliatory attack by the Moscow administration against this legendary operation carried out by the Ukrainian naval commandos is also possible. But at the moment, Russian leader Vladimir Putin seems to have admitted that the ongoing war in Ukraine has been quite difficult for the Moscow army. Fierce clashes in Bakhmut, the defeats in the south and north of Ukraine, put Putin in a pessimistic state. Acknowledging that the conditions of the war are quite difficult at the moment, the Russian leader looked rather hopeless in his latest press statement. Making important evaluations about the latest situation of Russia and the Moscow army, Vladimir Putin stated that they will not give up the struggle no matter how difficult the conditions are. But these desperate states of the Russian leader also upset the morale of the Moscow army units on the Ukrainian war fronts. For most of the Russian soldiers, like their leader Vladimir Putin, almost seem to have given up their hope on this war. After all these negatives, Putin recently went to Minsk to meet with his former ally, Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko. While in Minsk, the Russian president admitted a rare weakness, acknowledging that the situation in the 4 regions of Ukraine illegally annexed by Moscow is now extremely difficult. But after thousands of Russian troops were also dispatched there, the Kremlin leader's presence in Belarus raised fears that a mass ground attack was planned. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, on the other hand, dismissed reports of an attack from Belarus as completely false fabrications. However, Ukraine's Deputy Interior Minister, Yevhen Yen, announced that Kiev will now strengthen the defense on the Belarusian border. On this subject, Yen said, "We are building our defense lines along the border with Russia and Belarus." Although Belarus was not directly involved in the war, it did allow Russian troops to use its territory to invade Ukraine in February. For this reason, the Russian leader's visit to Belarus caused a lot of anxiety, despite the statements of Kremlin spokesman Peskov, who denied the possibility of opening a new front in the war. The World Agenda estimates that Vladimir Putin went to Belarus in search of a new support force and front. Putin held an extraordinary press conference with Lukashenko during his visit to Minsk. While the two were hardly asked questions about the conflict in Ukraine, the Russian president claimed that his nation had no intention of taking over Belarus. Putin said, "Russia has no interest in absorbing anybody. It's not a takeover, it's a matter of policy compliance." After Russia repeatedly failed on the battlefield and stopped its ambitions, Putin said, "The situation in the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics, in the Kherson and Zaporizhia regions is extremely critical." Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky, on the other hand, puts the morale of his army's soldiers above almost everything else. Ukrainian leader Zelensky made a morale-boosting visit to Bakhmut yesterday as his country prepares for a major Russian ground offensive in the new year. Meeting with his soldiers on the front line, Zelensky listened to the needs of his army and showed that the belief in victory still continues in Ukraine. Please do not forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications in order to be informed about new videos. Thank you for watching us.